North Korea's ruling political party held a rare Congress session last week, laying out its major policies and plans, including where the regime is going with its nuclear weapons development. Leader Kim Jong-un named the United States the North's primary enemy and pledged to bolster nuclear weapons and the North's military capabilities. And as if to prove he won't just talk the talk, a military parade took place after the 8-day Congress, showcasing what state media claimed was the world's most powerful weapon, a new submarine-launched ballistic missile. Now, this comes days before US President-elect Joe Biden takes office, with his exact policies on North Korea as yet unknown. Today, we look into some of the key issues with Chun In-bum, former Lieutenant General of the South Korean Army and Commander of South Korea's Special Warfare Command, and John Nielsen-Wright, Korea Foundation Korea Fellow at the Chatham House and Senior Lecturer of Modern Japanese Studies at the University of Cambridge. Thank you both so much for joining us again. And, well, let's start with you, General Chun. Now, North Korea's military parade last week, some people have been quite optimistic about what they displayed, saying that the military didn't show any intercontinental ballistic missiles, and hence it wasn't as provocative as it could have been. Would you agree with that? And also, what message do you think the military display was really intended to convey, and who was the target audience?
So I don't agree with that estimate. The only information that we have so far are the ones that was released by the North Koreans, and it's a couple of photos. And there could possibly have been a ICBM, even a bigger and better one than the one we saw 3 months ago, and we just don't know about it. So I don't agree that it's less provocative, but they are sending a message. And it's not just during the parade. During the entire meeting, they expressly show that they're going to continue with their nuclear program. They're making it more lethal, more survivable, which all means that it will have the capability for a first strike capability. This is very, very concerning. So they're sending a message to the world that they're not going to give up nuclear weapons. Now, they didn't do it with a big bang, so it could be seen as less provocative, but the message is very clear. They're not going to give up nuclear weapons, and they're challenging the rest of the world to do whatever it wants.
And they're trying to show that they have the capability to do that. And as you pointed out, Sir, we only have very limited information from what comes out of state media. And from what we saw, what stood out to you about this year's parade?
So the first thing is that they had a parade in the first place. It's been only 3 months, and they still had this event. So to me, I'm wondering if North Korea is having a very difficult situation, and Kim Jong-un wants to divert its economic woes in other ways. And the only area that he has had marginal success is in its nuclear capability and his military. So it's probably a strong message to his internal audience as well as the international world that their nuclear program is their primary success and they're going to continue with it. So this stood out to me. Also, the submarine-launched ballistic missile, as many experts have noted, is a new kind of direction that the North Koreans are going to enhance their capabilities to be more offensive in their reactions to world sanctions and so forth.
And Dr. Nielsen-Wright, who do you believe the North Korea's military parade was directed at, and what do you think, what message do you think the regime was trying to send?
I think it probably has two primary audiences. First and foremost, the international community, and within that, obviously, the incoming Biden administration. Whatever we may think about the nature of the North Korea's regime's capabilities, and I think there are legitimate question marks about the nature and range of that new hardware that we saw on display. I think it's an attempt to send a signal to Washington and to Biden in particular. North Korea is still a real and present danger. The North Korean regime would like to use its military strength as a means of extracting concessions from the international community. Secondly, I think the regime is looking to double down on its long-standing policy of saying to its own citizens that Kim Jong-un has two primary objectives. One, to keep the country safe by building up its military capabilities, and two, to develop the economy. The general, my co-guest rather, was right, I think, in pointing out that for the regime, problems at home, whether it's COVID-19, sanctions, or the impact of recent flooding, all mean that the administration, the North Korean administration, has an interest in distracting domestic opinion from difficulties at home, and a military parade is one way of doing that.
And of course, Kim Jong-un himself, he mentioned that the regime had failed to meet some of its major economic development goals. And well, Dr. Nielsen, right, Kim Jong-un also, he revived this Workers' Party Congress in 2016 for the first time since 1980. And at this year's Congress, the party said that it will have the Congress every 5 years. And in this year's Congress, again, Kim was actually inaugurated as the General Secretary of the Workers' Party, taking over his late father's position. What does this all signify? Why bring back the Congress sessions?
I think this is a way of consolidating Kim's own personal authority, giving himself a much higher profile role, if that's possible, in such a personality-centered regime. The symbolism of this, I think, is important. Convening the Congress itself, I think, is an important vehicle through which Kim can organize personnel reshuffles. And that's, I think, another important way of underlining his authority, bringing on board people who he would like to promote, as well as perhaps sending a signal about those individuals who are no longer still in favor. There's been a lot of speculation about Kim Yo-jong, the leader's sister, and whether she's been demoted or not. Some of that tea leaf reading, I think, in terms of personnel changes can be a little fanciful, but I think there's no doubt that the holding of the Congress itself and the new title of the leader is a way of bolstering Kim's own authority. We also have reports that suggest the Supreme People's Assembly will be meeting at some point towards the end of January. There has been some speculation that this may be a means by which, in the wake of President-elect Biden's inauguration next week, North Korea may be hoping to send yet a further signal, political this time rather than military, that North Korea expects the United States to make an earlier response on the issues that matter most to it, which of course is sanctions relief and the possibility of restarting negotiations with the United States.
And perhaps trying to prompt that kind of response, General Chun, the North unveiled what appeared to be a submarine-launched ballistic missile at its military parade last week. How far along do you think the North is in developing this technology, and what threat would this pose to South Korea and the United States?
So many experts believe that the boasts that North Korea has made about its SLBM capability is exaggerated and overstated. That the challenges that the North Koreans face in having to accomplish a submarine-launched ballistic missile, as well as having a submarine that can launch such a system, is far off. I agree, but I am in the position where I cannot challenge or take on an easy side the bluff that the North Koreans are making, because I live close by. The North Koreans have made it pretty clear that they want to have a working SLBM within the next 5 years. I think this will be very difficult for them, but you never know. They've been very ingenious in their capabilities. On the other hand, hunting submarines has always been a part of military deterrence for Korea as well as the United States. The East Sea area is ideal for submarine operations. That's why North Korea has many submarines already, and we've developed techniques to counter them. So this will be another kind of threat, another type of threat, and the alliance will have to make adjustments to make sure that North Korea is dealt with.
So does South Korea have an adequate counter-SLBM strategy at the moment? What do you think the country should really prioritize to strengthen its deterrence against the North?
So the SLBM capability will pose a threat to South Korea, to Japan, and even to the United States. This is a pretty serious capability if and when North Korea achieves them. Some people in South Korea propose a nuclear propulsion submarine for the South Koreans. I'm not a fan of that idea. I really think that unmanned surveillance vehicles, which is the first step to countering a long-range submarine that the North Koreans are seeking, is more ideal to be able to monitor the movements of North Korean submarines. And then I also feel that conventional submarines, which are very, very good these days, with enhanced hunter-killer capability. Hunter-killer capability is mostly refers to a submarine hunting another submarine. With enhanced hunter-killer capabilities is more ideal and more economic for the South Koreans. And I think that with the already capable U.S. Navy having its own nuclear-propelled submarines and decades of experience in monitoring movements of adversary submarines, that should be able to counter any kind of SLBM or nuclear-propelled submarines from North Korea.
So really bolstering the alliance really is very essential in countering future threats from North Korea as well. And Dr. Nielsen writes, Kim Jong-un said that the North will continue developing its nuclear weapons and strengthen its military capabilities. And of course, this comes ahead of Joe Biden's inauguration this week. To what extent do you think the North will continue to apply pressure if Biden doesn't show the sort of reaction that it craves?
I think it's probably likely, given past precedent, that the North is not going to sit on its hands and wait. It will do something to demonstrate that it needs to be taken seriously. Of course, it's not at the moment immediately clear what the Biden administration will do when it comes to policy towards North Korea. Joe Biden, of course, has an enormous range of very challenging domestic policy issues, COVID-19, dealing with the fallout from last week's dramatic events at the Capitol, managing the economic challenge of rebuilding the United States. But in foreign policy, of course, the Biden administration, judging from its recent personnel decisions, will be looking to reach out to some of its key allies. And of course, in Northeast Asia, those allies are South Korea, obviously, and Japan. So I think inevitably, the North Korean issue will loom large in those calculations about how best to manage alliance relations in Northeast Asia. So I don't expect that there will be no response from Washington. But if Kim Jong-un is sensible, he will not start immediately with a provocation, but I think will attempt to engage with the United States and try and have some form of effective dialogue. Because, of course, Kim Jong-un needs desperately to open the door to economic contact and economic revitalization. And it's the Biden administration that can, in principle at least, provide some reassurance in that direction.
So over the past few weeks, there's been a lot of attention on who Biden will pick as his leading officials for North Korea policy. And while Biden picked Wendy Sherman as his Deputy Secretary of State, and she was, of course, North Korea policy coordinator in the Clinton administration. And also Kirk Campbell, he was chosen to head Asia Security Affairs. Do you think they would be more practical or skillful in handling North Korea? And based on what we've seen from the Obama and Trump administrations, what do you think should be avoided when engaging with North Korea?
I think both of these personnel choices send a very reassuring signal. Experience counts, and in the wake of a pretty disastrous foreign policy under the Trump administration, the appointment of these two individuals, I think, is a very important and reassuring step forward in terms of alliance relations. Kirk Campbell, of course, the architect of the so-called pivot or rebalance to Asia during the Obama administration, will now assume his role as Indo-Pacific coordinator, which is quite a wide-ranging role, not merely restricted to Northeast Asia. His years of experience of working with allies in the region, I think, is a very important sign of reassurance. Wendy Sherman, as you rightly point out, of course, a great deal of experience of dealing with North Korea, but of course also since 2015, or rather in 2015, her role in negotiating with Iran. Of course, another developing nuclear power. I mean, that experience, I think, plus her own deep knowledge of North Korea, having visited North Korea, of course, with Hillary Clinton some time ago, I think her experience will give her an insight that will be extraordinarily useful in terms of understanding how best to deal with North Korea. Neither of these individuals will have, I think, any illusions about the challenges of finding a way out of the current predicament. And they will be pushing very hard in accordance with Joe Biden's own stated policy of wanting to see demonstrable progress on CVID, on comprehensive, verifiable, and irreversible disarmament of North Korea's nuclear capabilities. The real question is whether North Korea is prepared to offer anything really substantive. The Hanoi summit, of course, the abortive summit, failed partly because of the lack of convergence between the objectives of the Trump administration and Kim Jong-un's own policies. And I think we will need to see a skillful application of both pressure and the avoidance of relatively empty promises and giving away too much too soon. Trump administration, of course, by sitting down with Kim Jong-un on no fewer than 2, if not 3 occasions, gave Kim Jong-un a real propaganda victory without much meaningful progress. The Biden administration, I think, should be very careful in not spending its diplomatic and political capital too quickly.
Right, so taking very measured, practical, a very measured and practical approach to North Korea. Hopefully that's what we will see from the 20th going forward. Well, this is where we'll have to wrap up the discussion today. That was Chun In-bum, former commander of South Korea's Special Forces, and John Nielsen-Wright, senior lecturer at the University of Cambridge. Thank you both so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, as always, thank you for watching.